What's up, everybody? We made it to Stranger Things Day. It's officially Stranger Things Day. Now, if you know me, you've been following me, right? You know, I absolutely love Stranger Things. By far, it's probably top three of my favorite shows. Can't go as far to say it's my favorite yet. We'll see how it ends. But I absolutely love this show. I love everything about this show. Whenever I watch this show, I get so inspired to write my own show, my own series. There's no other show that I watch that inspires me as much as this show when it comes to writing your own series, doing my own TV show. I love the horror genre. I love everything about it, down to, the casting is great. Everything about it is just phenomenal, man. And I just want to take a moment to really talk about this show. I've done a season 4 breakdown of Stranger Things a few years ago when it came out, so feel free to go back and revisit that. But I wanted to just kind of, just have a conversation, just to talk about it because, like I said, I really love this show. And there's so many things layered in this show. There's so much symbolism. There's so much messaging that's in this show. So we're going to do a little bit of decoding and we're going to just kind of talk a little bit. So thanks for coming to the channel. I appreciate you. If you're not already subscribed, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's talk about Stranger Things. Now look, let's get right into it. Let's look at the upside down. Now when you look at the upside down is pretty much like a shadow realm. It's the Khalifoth, right? If you're familiar with Kabbalah, Tree of Life, the Khalifoth is the shadow side of that. So the upside down is more than just a monster dimension. It represents the repressed subconscious. It represents the underworld of trauma memory. It represents the Khalifoth side of the Tree of Life, which is the shadow reality beneath the manifested form. It mirrors the real world, right? We saw that when you go into the upside down, it looks just like Hawkins, but it's delayed. It's distorted. It's decayed. It's like frozen in time. Just like unresolved trauma. This is how unresolved trauma is, right? So it's a psychic echo field where what has not been integrated mutates and hunts. And this isn't about it being, we're not talking about this in a fantasy term, right? Because we know that all of the terms that they use in the show is an analogy or metaphor for, they use Dungeons and Dragons as a reference point to understand, and it's pretty much spot on. So many things that they discuss within the show that connects these creatures, these monsters, to these archetypes that exist within Dungeons and Dragons. It all makes it make sense for them, right? So when we talk about 11, to me the most obvious signs that this show has some layers is just look at the synopsis of the show. Look at the plot. It's about a girl named 11. We're talking about the number 11, so we're talking about the frequency of 11 that has psychic powers, psychic abilities. And this is through MK Ultra government experimentation. We know it's based on the Montauk Project, which was a real thing that happened with the CIA. They really did experiments to further their knowledge on psychic powers, psychic abilities, and what have you. So she has these abilities, these psychic powers, and it leads her to actually opening up a portal to this alternate reality, to this other world, to this monster dimension. So that alone in itself tells you, it screams, this is much, much, much deeper than just a fantasy, horror, sci-fi show. But it's only going to be available for you to see if you have the eye to see it. So look at 11. She's the awakened psychic archetype. So she's the divine feminine that is initiated or created through this MK Ultra style government testing programming. This is also trauma induced psychic powers. We've talked about trauma activating your psychic abilities. So this is trauma-induced psychic opening, even down to her opening the gate. This always happened from a sense of trauma. The sensory deprivation and the psychic amplification chambers. So we got sensory deprivation chambers. Now you can actually Go do this. You can find this. You can search and see where you can actually visit and get yourself into a sensory deprivation tank and kind of see how it is. But it removes everything, all the sensory input with you being in that tub, with you being in that space, and so it heightens that your synapses, your psychic connections, that those mental connections. So it allows you to be able to enter into this frequency, into this space that's very hard to get into, kind of like advanced meditation techniques, so to speak. Now, this parallels with real occult knowledge when we're looking at 11, because psychic gifts have always been historically forced open through trauma, isolation, and extreme conditioning. It's a dark inversion of spiritual initiation. This is historically what they have done when it comes to in terms of psychic gifts. Okay, so 11 represents the suppressed intuitive feminine, the priestess that's weaponized by patriarchal systems. They made her a weapon. So everything about her, she's just a weapon. She's seen as an asset. She's not a person. This is why she's 11. She's deduced to a number instead of a name, right? So she had to learn her name. She had to learn her true identity, who she really was. So she's a human conduit between dimensions. Okay? So even down to her shaved head, right? The hospital gown. All of them had to wear the hospital gowns. All of them, their heads were shaved. This is mirroring ancient initiation. This is synonymous with being stripped of identity before you learning who you truly are. So everybody is in the same thing. It's like a uniform. It's like making everybody the same. So Hawkins lab is this initiation chamber, or this initiation order, right? So it's not just government corruption. It's an occult institution. It's literally hidden in the purposes of what it does and what they do. So it symbolizes secret orders that is harvesting psychic potential. This is some Stephen King type shit. We seen this, right? This is soul manipulation through scientific ritual. This is the severance of divine intuition from natural growth. So Dr. Brenner is the archetype of the false father. This is why he's called Papa. He's the authority who he's claiming to teach, but what he's actually doing is using their power. He's trying to extract power. He's trying to control. This is colonial control over consciousness is all it is. This is what it represents. Now, when we look at the Demogorgon and Vecna, this is trauma in form. So these beings aren't random. They're embodied psychic rot. They are manifested rage and abandonment. Ego devourers that is feeding on unresolved emotional frequency. Vecna in particular targets those that are ashamed or grieving or emotionally fractured. So he mirrors how trauma preys on isolation. So he's beyond just being a villain. You have to see more than just a villain. You have to understand that he is the unintegrated shadow consciousness that has been weaponized. Right? Now, when you look at the Duffer Brothers, this is a sense of ritual programming. The show is occult coded. Now, did they do this purposefully? I don't know. They could have just been following a sense of writing, a writing style or a writing format. Now, I'll be truthful with y'all. I actually was subscribed to, what was it called? Masterclass. And it had the Duffer Brothers up there. They was talking about writing a series. And I tapped in. I looked at a lot of what they talked about in how they wrote the process. Now, of course, they're not going to come out and tell you this is just some occult shit. This is what we know in the dynamics of powerful storytelling. They're not going to tell you that. But anybody really worth their salt as a writer got to have some sense of occult knowledge because it's in there. Now, it's possible that people can transmit spiritual messaging and not be aware that they are doing so. That is also a possibility, right? So their show is formatted in an occult code. It's very occult coded. The children discovering hidden knowledge, the adults denying intuition, the feminine psychic savior, the veiled thin reality between the seen and the unseen, this shit is occult heavy. This is classic initiatory myth structure. This is a myth of initiation. The innocent must awaken to the hidden war behind reality. So that mirrors what many souls go through during spiritual awakening. This will feel very familiar to your soul. Now, this is why I created the course that I made called Hidden in Plain Sight, The Art of Decoding Movies and Media. So if you do want to learn more from me specifically about how I decode and how I see things the way that I do, what to look for in decoding, and how to understanding you decoding media and movies, you're actually decoding yourself, and what to do with that in terms of understanding the self, right? But this is why I made that program. This is why I made that course, because so many people, they have requests about movies to talk about shows, because these things move us. They move what's already in us. It's already in us. But it's just the art itself is sparking that feeling, right? So this is heavily occult coded, even down to the femininity and the intuition pattern. So Stranger Things consistently reinforces the mother's intuition in Joyce, the psychic girl or the psychic savior in 11, and the ignored emotional truth. So you deal with a lot of men doubting and logic resisting, but intuition knowing, because Joyce was never wrong none of the time. Ever. She was never wrong. She always knew. It was always the others who was questioning what she knew, but she always knew what she knew. We also saw this a little bit with Nancy. Nancy always, when she got her hooks in something, she knew what she knew. I personally appreciate the acknowledgement of the feminine that they do. Anytime you dealing with a writer, a producer, a filmmaker, a storyteller that acknowledges the feminine, 9 times out of 10, there's some occult knowledge there. 9 times out of 10. Because this is not something that's commonly given to us through society, because it's a patriarchal society. It's just a world that we live in. It's just the world that we live in. But that whole men doubting, logic resisting, while the intuition knows, it echoes an ancient esoteric teaching. And it's that the feminine remembers what the system erases. So it always comes back into a sense of knowing. Stranger Things is not about the monsters. That's the scary part when you see it. When you're looking at horror, it has to have something visually that's scary. But that's not the warning. It's not warning you about monsters. It's actually warning you about what happens when humanity suppresses intuition, when emotional pain gets buried, when the shadow is exiled instead of integrated. The upside down, it is the world that we create when we refuse to feel. This is what this is in terms of in our own inner world. So the occult truth that's hidden right there in plain sight is that the children, they don't survive because of weapons. Now they use some, because Nancy gonna pick up a shotgun, okay? If ain't nobody else is gonna get a weapon besides Hopper, it's gonna be Nancy, okay? She gonna grab her a weapon. But it's deeper than that, because it was friendship. It was emotional truth. It was intuition. It was courage to face the unseen that really helped them to survive. So this is classic shadow alchemy. You don't destroy the monster. You have to bring the light. So this is the shadow alchemy, right? Now, there's a strong, when you're dealing with monsters or other realm, you dealing with chaos. If you recall, Dustin talked about the Mind Flayer being an ancient psychic entity that is so old and ancient it doesn't even remember where it comes from. That's deep, yo. You dealing with some chaos shit. You getting into that Cthulhu Necronomicon space when you get to dealing in it. And when you get into that space, that's when you get the closest that you're gonna get. When it comes to terms of film and media, where you dealing with that black science, when you're dealing with that ancient black science, it's deduced to chaos nowadays. That's the form that we see it in all the time. So you're dealing with chaos, entropy, and occult warfare. So the upside down is dealing with primordial chaos. So most interpretations gonna stop at shadow, right? They're not going to go deep into it. But the show truly encodes something older, something darker, something more ancient. When you get into that space, that's ancient black shit, okay? It's ancient black knowledge. So the upside down is preformed reality. It's unmanifested potential. It's the void before disorder, before order. So it's primordial chaos. That's code. In modern terms, they're going to call that destruction or call that evil. So whenever you see something destructive, evil, it's a representation of primordial chaos. Every single time. That's what it is. In occult cosmology, that would be Tiamat, right? Which is Mesopotamian chaos, see, right? That would be Noon in ancient Egypt, right? That would be the abyss if we talking Sephiroth, if we talking Kabbalah. So it's not about it being evil, it's raw creation energy that has not yet been harmonized. So the horror comes from the it's chaos without consciousness that makes it become predatory, right? So when you got that sense of energy, there's no consciousness in it, it's predatory. Okay, this is what we have to understand about Henry or Vecna or one, right? So Hawkins didn't just open a portal, it broke a spell of containment because it pierced the veil into another place. So they didn't accidentally open a rift. It was an initiation without wisdom. They were doing things that they didn't understand, right? So that lab represents civilization tampering with forces that's too ancient to control. And there's also, if you look at Russia, they was doing the same thing. This is why they were showing you that coming from Russia as well. Why do you want to weaponize some shit like this? This is such an ancient and uncontrollable force. What makes you think that you can control this? This is modern science poking at metaphysical reality. This is them people with their fucking CERN machine trying to open a portal. Why you want to do that? See, this is what happens. This is chaos magic when it goes rogue. Because in occult terms, you're not actually summoning, but you're disturbing a sealed archetypal realm. So once this chaos gets a taste of consciousness in this realm, it starts war because it won't. You see what I'm saying? It comes after it. So Vecna is an architect of disorder. So he's not just pure chaos. He's conscious chaos seeking to overwrite reality. This is what made season 4 my favorite season. Because now we got a conscious, walking, waking, talking villain. We didn't understand or quite know when it came to the Demogorgon or the Mind Flayer. Because they originated from that realm. But now you got Vecna. And so now we get a conscious force explaining this to us, right? He operates like a fallen initiator, not a beast. This is why he can speak. The Demogorgon can't talk. You don't know what the fuck that is. He's just gonna come, roar, yell, bite, eat your ass. But not Vecna. He got some shit he want to tell you before he kill you. See, he wants you to be aware of what the fuck is going on. He remembers. He knows he knows what's happening. He's calculated. He is selecting the people that he's choosing. He's not just randomly picking. He's selecting these people. We saw his methods of deciphering through people till he landed on Patrick. They showed us this, right? So his symbolism is trauma that has evolved into dominance. He's the shadow that believes he's God. This is why in the Rainbow Room, he was the purple going down to the red. This is why it was showing that energy of hierarchy, but it was chaos that has learned hierarchy. So he mirrors the sorcerer that believes that pain is power, the initiate who refuses humility, the mind that weaponized suffering. This is why when Eleven was going through the things with Brenner, when he tried to get her to kill that cat, he wanted to see what she was. See, Henry would have just killed that cat. He wouldn't have cared. She couldn't do it. She didn't actually, until they tried to lock her up in that room and she wanted to get away, or when people was fucking with her friends. This is what drives Elle, or what pushes Elle to that point, is protecting the people that she loved, right? She's not just a psychopathic killer. Because if she was, she would have just killed that cat. But she didn't do that. But we saw Henry just killing animals and just killing. He was just practicing. He was just practicing. This was showing us the psychology of what we dealing with. See, he doesn't devour randomly. He targets specifically emotional fractures. He knows exactly what he's doing. So when we see Max cross over into his realm, he says, "What are you doing here, Max?" When you go into the red, you know you're in his world. Just like they said with the Freddy Krueger shit. And I so appreciate that shout out to Nightmare on Elm Street. I fucking love Nightmare on Elm Street. I already suspected it with the character named Nancy. Nancy being the fighter that she is and fighting back and wanting to take the fight to Vecna. I already suspected Nancy to be a shout out to Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street. Now, she does remind you of Nancy Drew a little bit too. But, that always kind of stuck with me. And then in season 4, when they brought in Robert Englund and they allowed Nancy to make the connection with the help of Robin, shit was so dope. It was just like bringing them pieces together. And if you look at it, Victor Creel being Robert Englund, so looking at Freddy Krueger, there might have been a lot of inspiration of Freddy Krueger when you looking at Vecna. They both get their victims through their mind, through their mental. Freddy gets them when they go into sleep in the dream world, while Vecna taps in based on their frequency, based on their pain. So he taps in through their thought frequency and he gets in their mind, send them in a trance. It's just like being in a dream state when he sends them in that trance. So they come into his world. So when she went into that red world, when she was seeing all that red, whenever you see all that red, that's Vecna. That's his lair. That's his mind. Just like when in Nightmare on Elm Street, they end up in Freddy's boiler room, right? They both was severely burned. They were their punishment for what they had done, they ended up being severely burned with Freddy Krueger and with Vecna. This shit was dope. It was just a dope connection to me, and I caught it, and I greatly appreciate it as somebody that really loves Nightmare on Elm Street. But it was a dope connection. So you gotta look at it and know chaos will feed on unstructured emotion. This is why people get chaotic and people can blow up and things can go sideways when people dealing with a whole lot of unprocessed emotion, right? A lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of fragmented hurt and pain. So when you look at it and you realize and you see that the children are the chaos barriers and the chaos harmonizer, right? So the kids aren't the victims. The kids are representing of initiates. This is why they're so young. So they are initiates that are born into the chaos. So they carry psychic perception and pattern recognition. They're able to recognize things. Look at how Dustin put shit together. Look at how Lucas is able to put shit together. A lot of us didn't like Lucas in the first season because of how harsh he was to Elle. But that was his discernment because he knew that there was something she was hiding. He knew there was something else there. And once he got all the pieces to the puzzle, he became a top protector of her. He was top tier when it came to protecting her. So he was only being what his archetype was. He was being exactly what he was supposed to be. So the raw emotional sensitivity of the kids, the intuitive guidance, they are labeled as weird, right? But occultly, this is a signature of a chaos navigator. This is why they gotta be nerds. They gotta be weird. They gotta be losers. Like in it, this is why, it fits the archetype. See, children can move through entropy because they haven't calcified into rigid identity structures. So the way they navigate between them adults, especially when you get to episodes 6 and 7 in season 4, and they navigate in between the police and their parents, this is that because they can do that. Okay, this is why the adults cannot see what they see. They need them kids because the kids can see. Now, aside from Joyce, everybody else is blind as hell. Can't nobody else see a damn thing that's an adult. I want to say this, Karen. I want to say before I forget that I feel like Karen was the most present parent, and she was trying the hardest to really get involved with her kids, but they just shut her out and they didn't allow her in. But she was trying, and they made an effort to show us over and over again how much she tried. And now you gotta remember, Mike is the heart. You gotta understand how much they showing love to the feminine in this show. because they showed you that they basically was telling you Will would have been a totally different child without his mother, yo. That was the whole thing. You got Will, you got Billy, and you got Henry. And they all operate on the same current. They all were sensitive boys that were targeted by the mind flayer. This isn't a coincidence. Now, a lot of people think that Henry created the mind flayer. I thought the same thing until I researched the first shadow. Now, according to the first shadow, Henry got infected by the mind flayer a long time ago before he even got to Hawkins because he fell into Dimension X. Now, Brenner is also familiar about Dimension X because they tell us in the first shadow that his father got trapped into this alternate dimension. So he always knew what was out there, which is what led him to be the leader of them kids doing that shit that he was doing. He always knew there was another dimension out there. It was something he already knew. But you got to see the first shadow in order to know all this. My only gripe with Netflix and with them is that they didn't put this shit on Netflix for people to watch. I get they want to make money on Broadway, but it's actually canon to the story. All them grew up together. Henry, Joyce, Hopper, Bob, Newbie. According to First Shadow, Henry got the idea to frame his father from Joyce because Joyce thought it was the daddy. See, Joyce always was open. Always. If you know, she got strong Piscean spiritual energy. If you take notice, if in the first 2 seasons, that's why she always looking for her keys. She always looking for her keys because she always losing shit because she absent-minded, because she spiritual as fuck. See, spiritual ain't got nothing to do with what we think spirituality got to do with. It's really don't have nothing to do with none of that. But Joyce is the feminine, so they show so much love to the feminine in this show, and I appreciate that so much because so many things out there don't do it, which is why this is so occult heavy, because the occult and so much information pertaining to the occult got to do with the feminine current, because it has to do with intuition and what's hidden and what you can't see, right? So the adults can't see what the kids see because they can't operate on the same They can't operate on the same frequency. They can't move through it like the kids. Now, this makes me think about It. If you watching It, Welcome to Derry, bro, that shit is heavy. I got to do a whole nother separate video. But it's interesting as hell that immediately when Will tell his pops about everything, his dad is actually able to see it. That's really interesting to me. His father can see the balloons and everything. So already you know he's believing in his son. Now, I want you to understand, it's not that chaos is bad, because from an ancient occult perspective, chaos is the doorway to godhood. No initiation occurs without disorder. So this is the encoded instruction. Is you do not awaken through comfort. It's not about being comfortable. You awaken through destabilization. The townspeople cling to their normacy, right? The children be off getting, every time you see them get on them bikes, they riding off into the unknown. You don't know where they're going. You don't know what they might end up in. And this is symbolizing conscious souls willingly entering entropy to reclaim knowledge. The upside down is the unconscious mind forcing its way into awareness. So the whole bubbling up of the upside down coming into Hawkins is like the inevitable of what you bury deep must come up to the surface, right? So the real spell of it that you're dealing with in this show is emotional suppression. It's the most dangerous force that you see in Stranger Things, because it's about denial. Denial of grief, denial of intuition, of trauma, of psychic disturbance. This denial creates energetic stagnation, and stagnation turns into rot. So chaos comes to break up that stagnation. It comes to get things moving again. It arrives to break that stagnation. So the show is teaching an ancient occult law. When energy is suppressed, chaos is going to return it to flow, even violently if necessary. So no, look, 11 opens portals, but she opens these portals through intense emotion, when she's in an altered state, through trauma recall. This mirrors real esoteric knowledge, like they really giving us game. You know what I'm saying? This is real, not real knowledge, because a strong emotional charge can open dimensional thresholds. This is how you jump dimensions. This is how you manifest. This is how you bring shit from heaven down to your earth. Is through an extreme emotional charge. This is what he was describing in that scene on Ghost when that train man was trying to teach him how to move stuff. He was like, "How you do it? Like, you just put all your force, all your might, all your hurt, all your you push it down and just explode like a reactor." That's an emotional charge that he was describing. This is what he was talking about. See, most of the time when we get into this manifesting space, we often think we need positive. It's all about positive, but that's not true. It's just about the charge. You can emotionally charge some shit through negative emotion too, you know? So Stranger Things is really telling you how thin reality is. It's telling you that consciousness is autonomy. It's telling you that chaos has to be mastered and that the shadow is a portal, right? So chaos is not about chaos being the enemy. Chaos is the womb of rebirth. But only those who learn to consciously move through it will emerge with autonomy or as sovereign. Most people will get consumed. Most people will get consumed. So let's talk about the characters a little bit. Let's go deeper into the characters, because each major character represents a role within a metaphysical ritual of awakening, or shadow confrontation, or even chaos mastery. So these are archetypes. Now, let's start with 11. She's the chaos priestess, or the crown gate. So she's the axis. She is the veil breaker. She's the liminal child, meaning she's in between spaces. She's walking between worlds. She's the living gateway between worlds. So esoterically, she embodies the crown chakra, unprotected. The divine feminine, subjugated or subjected to forced initiation. She was forced into her psychic ability. She also embodies the oracle that's been created through trauma instead of a sacred ritual. So 11 is what happens when raw psychic potential is weaponized before autonomy is formed. She had no identity. She didn't know. This is why season 3 was so important for her. Season 3 was so important because she learned autonomy. This is why she had to be paired with Max. She had to be paired with another woman, another feminine energy that would teach her girl power, the girl way, right? So this was the importance of that season. Also, when we look at that season, we also see how the weaponization works, because she was taught, brought up, raised to be a weapon. And we see her friends gradually fall into that same way of thinking and just thinking, oh, we got Elle. Elle can just do this and this and this. And Mike is like, hold on. Y'all ain't finna put my girl up in this all the time for something to happen to her, because y'all just want to use her powers. And I actually care about her, and I want to make sure that she gonna be okay. And this was the moment that he says, I love her. Even though he was just speaking fast, just saying everything, he came out with his truth and said it. Right? And this is what Will was alluding to. Mike, you're the heart, bro. Like, he emotionally stabilizes everybody. He do it for Will, and he does it for 11. The whole Byler thing is weird to me, because it's just painfully obvious that Mike has no interest at all in Will in that capacity. So if people not talking about Byler and it being Jonathan and Nancy, I think it's weird, because there's nothing there. It's like shipping Dustin with Max. Because we do know Dustin liked Max initially, but she didn't like him back the same way she liked Lucas. So it's like, but Mike doesn't like Will. He likes 11. Why would y'all constantly want to do this? And I see why people get to feel the way that they feel when people bombard with this, because I just think y'all are weird, because there is absolutely no instance of this boy liking this boy in this way other than him being a friend. He genuinely talks to him about this girl all the time. He is madly in love with this girl, and basically Will and Elle is like brother and sister. So yes, Will is struggling with how he feels about Mike, but I just don't see them coupling up, y'all. I just think that's kind of weird, but that's just me. Okay, that's just me. I don't really see it that way. Now, Vecna is the fallen initiate, as I stated before, or Henry. So he's what happens when someone enters the shadow and crowns themselves God. Someone who takes hierarchy, someone who immediately wants to supersede and use dominance over those he sees as below. So he represents a corrupted mystic. He represents a broken child who chose domination over healing. He represents the ego that spiritualized its trauma. He mirrors the sorcerer who bypassed compassion. He mirrors the initiate that mistook pain for enlightenment. Vecna is the spectral opposite of 11. So she represents integration and he is like conquer. Okay, so his archetypal role is he's the initiate who failed the trial and he became a warden of suffering. So Mike, we go back to Mike. He is the heart. He's the anchoring heart. He's the solar devotion. So he's not just the boyfriend. He is the emotional stabilizer for 11. He represents the conscious ego learning to trust the unseen, the heart-centered force that grounds the psychic realm, the solar masculine trying to understand the lunar feminine. He truly wants to protect her. He wants to watch over her. When there's those moments that it doesn't seem like there's anybody else that would help, it's always him who helps. He grabbed the weight and hit Billy. He grabbed Elle so the mind flayer couldn't pull her away. It's pretty much always him. This is what he represents. He symbolizes identity, learning how to love power without needing to control it. So he is like masculine, a healthy masculine energy. Dustin is like the fool, the trickster, right? Because he's the brain of the group. But he also brings the joy. And this is where I'm worried about Dustin. Because we saw Dustin go through this trauma. And I just don't know if Dustin going to be able to still bring this same type of joy. From him witnessing Eddie's death. From him being present. From what he went through with that. I just don't know. Because he's the carrier of joy. You know what I'm saying? Even down to them writing in his corneal dysplasia. I probably said that wrong, but it's the bone. Him not being able to grow all his teeth, missing some bones or whatnot or what have you. But that being in his character, that in itself too, it really makes him more childlike. But occultly he represents the trickster, right? But he's the trickster in luminous form. He's the jester who disarms darkness through humor. Right? So he's the alchemist who transmutes fear into play. So the sacred fool appears in all initiatory systems. There is always the fool. Always when there is initiation. He prevents the rigidity, the ego inflation, and the despair. This is what he brings to the table. So he reminds the group, he reminds the party that transformation requires lightness. So his archetypal role is to be the joy bringer. He's ensuring that the ritual doesn't become tyranny, that it doesn't become beyond what it was initially for. Remember, they were a D&D party, right? Now, Lucas, I love Lucas, y'all. Lucas is the warrior of discernment. He is the logic combined with courage, right? Because he'll stand up with his little slingshot, right, to go against a monster with a slingshot. That shit takes some courage, Lucas, okay? So he's the protector archetype. He's the voice of grounded strategy. He's the warrior who questions blindly unleashed power. This is why he was the way he was with Elle. So he represents the masculine that does not spiritualize danger. So Lucas acts as the sword of reality. He's discerning what must be trusted and what must be challenged. This is why he kept challenging her and he never trusted her in the beginning. So he tempers that psychic chaos with clarity. Now, Max is the wounded feminine. She's the inner child guardian. She's the emotional mirror. So she represents the traumatized young feminine, the repressed grief. She's the soul resisting emotional collapse. So her arc with Vecna is very deeply symbolic. So it's trauma haunting trauma. Her arc with Vecna is like she becomes the battlefield of this psychic warfare. Everything takes place within Max's mind. So Max shows what happens when grief is not processed. She's the shadow when the shadow crowns itself. So she also symbolizes the soul choosing music, memory, and will to survive. Because this is what she did. Although they discovered the music, she discovered the memory, that it was a key with memory. As she discovered this, so did 11. This is what 11 learned from Henry. Henry is an initiator. He initiated Elle. He taught Elle everything she know. Everything she do it just like him. She saw him do it first. It's just like people nowadays, if you watch basketball, right? You see so many people nowadays able to do the shit that Michael Jordan did. But nobody knew Michael Jordan or the shit that Michael Jordan did was capable when he did it. So because Michael Jordan was able to do it, all these other players now can do this shit without thinking twice about it, because he did it first. He showed them it was possible. Henry already showed Elle what was possible, but she took it to the next level. This is why she is 11. He's 1, but she's 11, which is nothing but 2 ones. So 11 is 2 ones. So it has that heightened ability. This is why she could open doors. He needed her ability to be able to open doors. Now, Will is the threshold walker. He's the dream walker. So he's not weak at all. And they showed us this in the first 5 minutes, when they released the first 5 minutes of season 5. And they showed us him in that upside down and how he was fighting, how he was running. Will was surviving. Now, this also shows us when they were showing Vecna, it's pretty obvious he knew everything that was happening before it happened. We didn't know that he knew this. We didn't know. So it raises the question, did he want them to find Will? Was this always the plan, to find Will? Right? So Will, to get back to Will, the thing is he's psychically open. This is what it means when people say somebody is sensitive, especially a boy, right? And when they say people are sensitive in this way, it's usually psychically open. This is what I'm feeling like with Will, Henry, and Billy. I'm sensing that these boys were a lot the same in that way. So esoterically, Will is the empathetic seer. He's the initiate that entered chaos too soon. He's the psychic that never really left the luminal realm. It's very possible that Will could have powers if he was taught to have powers. He probably would get powers. So he represents sensitivity in a hostile world. He represents the soul that's been marked by shadow contact. Will is the sensitive who carries the echo of the upside down. So his archetypal role is that he's the one who touches the abyss and he comes back unaltered. He returns altered. My fault. He returns changed. He's never the same again. Just like Henry. This happened to Henry. But you would have to have seen the first shadow to know that. Again, I can't be 100% on everything I'm saying about the first shadow because I haven't seen it. I would love to get on a plane and go to New York and just go see it. But I've done a lot of research and watched a lot of content from people that have seen it. Watched a few videos where there was some recorded stuff where you can kind of see it. So this is, something that attributes to the story that isn't in the shows. And that's one thing that I really wish we could see the first shadow. Now, when we move on to Hopper, now we have to remember Hopper is the broken guardian or the broken father because he lost his daughter, right? He's already a grief-stricken person. He's already stuck in delusion and in denial because he didn't even want to tell people his daughter died. He still was talking to people like she was still alive, right? So he is the grief-stricken protector. So he symbolizes the masculine healing from collapse, the father archetype returning to sacred responsibility, the wounded warrior reclaiming integrity. The hat is a huge cue into who he is and him being a leader. Now they say this is a ode to what's my man name? Indiana Jones. My bad. Now archetypically speaking, a hat is symbolic to a master, somebody self-mastery, somebody in a position of authority. He is the chief of police being authority in the physical realm. So quite naturally, it makes sense for him to also have this hat. when we look at Joyce, Joyce is the oracle. She's the oracle mother. She's the intuitive feminine that has been ignored by the world. Everything she say, everybody thinks she lying, thinks she crazy, thinks she just losing her mind. It's quite natural and typical in the 80s anyway, the further you go back, for women to be treated that way. So she represents that psychic mother archetype. She represents the primal knowing. She represents the voice of the unseen realm. She is never wrong. It's just nobody ever believes her. So her esoteric role is that she's the matriarch who hears the other world, and she refuses to be silent every time. And now Dr. Brenner was the false hierophant, right? So he wasn't a real teacher. He was a perversion of initiation. He inverted the initiation. So he symbolized institutional spirituality, control masquerading as guidance, ritual knowledge stripped of compassion. Because he was weird. Nigga was weird as hell. Had a weird thing that he was doing with Elle. But he's mockery of true mystic initiation. So the whole group itself is not a caste. We looking at a soul structure. Everybody being a fragmented piece. Each representing a fragment of the psyche on its evolutionary path. Now there's some moments that I want to touch on specifically. Let's talk about the massacre at Hawkins, right? Episode 7. Phenomenal episode. I love it. Dear Billy is probably my favorite episode, probably the best episode of season 4. But Massacre at Hawkins is my next favorite one. And there's so many moments in it, when Dustin puts together his theory about Vecna, when they leave the house, and there's the flip from them leaving the Willers in the real world, and then you got Nancy, Steve, Robin, and Eddie leaving in the upside down, and there's that flip, and when you got the parents that run out there. Episode 7, phenomenal episode. A lot of things happen. And they show us everything with 1 and 11. And when 11 regains her power in Nina, right, in that sensory deprivation tank, when she regains her power, is not through rage. Most of the time we think rage is how we get our power, but it was actually through fear. It was a memory of love. He said that he used a memory that made him sad and also made him happy. And now she found that memory for herself, but it was a memory of love. It was her mother, when she first had her very first memory, her very first thing that she saw was her mother telling her that she loved her. And it's not about it being sentimental storytelling. It's about the metaphysical instruction that it entails. Now, memory is a magical technology. In occult systems, memory is not nostalgia. It is a portal to original frequency. So 11 does not remember her mother in a psychological sense. She re-enters the vibrational field of being loved in that moment. This is crucial. You see, her power was originally awakened through trauma, but trauma is unstable fuel. It burns the body and fractures the soul. So when she remembers her mother's love, she reconnects to her true source, her true current. This is what she grabbed a hold of that allowed her to push 1 into the upside down. This is what she tapped into, and the power that she had in season 2. She just did not have memory or recollection of it. She was simply going off of what Kylie had told her. Her power was originally, like I said, awakened through the trauma, but when she remembered her mother's love, she reconnected to her true source current. And that is the field that existed before the programming, before Brenner got his hands on her, before the experience, before the psychic violence. So this is a soul code retrieval. She's retrieving from her true self. Henry and 11, these are 2 different responses to trauma. Henry Creel and Jane, or 11, grew through similar suffering. But the difference was that Henry chose resentment as identity, and 11 remembered love as origin. This is the entire occult message. Trauma is either going to calcify into domination, or it will reforge into sovereignty. The moment Henry nearly overtakes her symbolizes the ego shadow attempting to overwrite the soul's original essence. If you look at that scene again, in that episode, he is so surprised and so shocked. She's able to fight against him. He doesn't understand. And her act of remembering love is what returned her divine authority. So the mother archetype is the source of power. She remembered her mother saying, I love you. It wasn't about Brenner, nothing about the lab, nothing about the system. It was her real origin. So when we look at in African spiritual systems, in the occult, in esoteric views, the mother's love holds spiritual lineage power. It is the tether to the ancestral realm. So this memory reconnects her to her soul contract. So she stops fighting with hatred and begins to move with clarity. So this is when her power stabilizes. This is how she sparked back her powers. And in that moment, in that tank, the lights flicker, her powers come back. They come back online. So looking at the scene, you see the breath of release. As she remembers her mother, you can hear the breathing. The breathing pattern becomes rhythmic. So it's like life returning to flow. The memory and emotion is the water element. There's tears, softness, vulnerability. Water restores psychic integrity. This is why when people are drowning or near death through water, there's a recollection of memory. There's clarity through the water. There's fire, which is power, ignition, right? So her rage is transformed into focus, sovereign or autonomy, right? And then there's ether element, which is the consciousness, right? So this is where the magic really happens, because she returns to her original spiritual signature. This elemental realignment allows her to overcome Henry, allows her to beat Henry. So power assessed through trauma is always going to be volatile. This is why the X-Men got to go learn from Xavier, because it's volatile. It's not stable, right? But power accessed through love is control. This is the key. Henry draws his power from injury. Elle draws her power from remembrance. So this scene is teaching that your deepest strength is not your anger. It is your uncorrupted essence. So 11 almost loses when she doubts herself. The memory breaks the hypnotic hold of Henry's voice. And this is also important the whole season. The girl been dealing with bullying. There's the reason she's been dealing with the bullying. That's not a coincidence. If you notice, people that get bullied, they have a bully. It's not just like a random person. They can be randomly bullied, don't get me wrong, through situations and circumstances. But a lot of times in media, they show you the same bully constantly. So it's like their own personal bully. You don't see them going to do that shit to all these other people. They're specifically targeting certain specific people. It has to do with a thing of self-worth. So Henry casts a psychological astral spell. Love is what shatters it. This is what Max remembers. She remembers the love. It takes her back to love. This is what allowed her to break free. This is soul sovereignty or soul autonomy, reclaiming the body. So the purpose of the scene, it wasn't about her winning the fight, even though she did win the fight. It marks the transition from trauma forced and initiate, right? So she no longer needs pain to access power. Now she remembers who she is exactly. This is why as soon as she wakes up, she lifts that tank. This is why she had to do that. So the Dear Billy episode, Max running towards the light, by far the greatest episode that they have. The cinematography, the music, the lighting, everything. It was just a well done episode. So when you're looking at a bully, speaking of bullies, we gotta talk about Jason. Now Jason was terrifying as fuck to me, and it's not because he was just cruel. It's because he believes he's right, and he was a dangerous fucking character. His archetype, he was the moral executioner. He represents unconscious collective fear being weaponized. He was the ego inflated by perceived moral superiority. This is how a lot of people be. He was the shadow hiding behind virtue. Jason was the mob consciousness possessed by fear. He became a priest of panic. They showed you, they foreshadowed so much in the first episode when they introduced us to Eddie and he was reading about Dungeons and Dragons and the whole satanic panic that happened in the 80s. He literally read this. The first scene that we see Eddie, it's an introduction to him with him reading about that satanic panic. This is something that went on heavily in the 70s and 80s because media was becoming more predominant and it was uncontrolled. So they had this whole satanic panic where everything occult, everything is about Satan. Same thing. This is something that really went on a lot in the 80s. So this is how people looked at it. We went through our own form of it. When I was young, it was Harry Potter. They didn't want the kids to watch Harry Potter. You got some parents now today who don't want to let their kids watch K-pop Demon Hunters because this is something that is real. This really happens. So we had that mob consciousness. The way he was able to rile that town up was so fucking scary. But it's a hive mind. They showed us the hive mind on both sides. So they showed us the monsters in the monster realm. They operate as one. Vecna, the Mind Flayer, the Demogorgons, the Demidolls, all one mind. This mob consciousness was all one mind. They were all in the mind of Eddie is doing these satanic rituals. We got to find him. He's killing our kids, blah, 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 blah. Jason was the priest of panic. This is spiritually dangerous. So a bully, right? Every bully is a wounded initiate that never healed. So this is why the pattern repeats. You get a child that's shamed, they become the shamer. This is why most of the time you learn that person being bullied was being bullied most of the time by an adult. Case in point, Billy, right? This is what we learn about Billy. He was a very complex and complicated character and very layered. This is what makes good writing. This is what makes good characters. Right? Because there's so many things that we didn't like about Billy because they alluded to tell us a lot about him without actually telling us. Like we knew he was a racist. If you black watching this show, you knew immediately Billy was racist because why you got a problem with Lucas and nobody else? Who are them? Who are those people? What are those people capable of? We immediately know what to look for. So it wasn't a surprise to us at all that Billy was racist. We immediately understood that's who he was and that was his character. Right? And then we get more in season 3. We realize he's a tormented soul. He was abandoned as a child. So we have another sensitive child, a sensitive boy, but he was abandoned by his mother. So he turned into the Billy that we saw. Maybe this could have been Will had he not had his mother, had he not had Joyce. Remember how his father treated him. And look at how Billy's father treated him. Right? So the silenced voice often will become that aggressor. So we saw Billy as a child and what was going on and how happy and joyful he was in his youth with his mother. And once he started to deal with that abuse, what he turned into, how he became aggressive. He started fighting kids at school. Look at the way he beat up Steve. He didn't even care about Steve punches. He take them punches all the time. His daddy be beating his ass. He didn't care. It was nothing for him to eat Steve punches. Right? So the powerless becomes an enforcer of control. This is karmic circuitry, right? Made visible. This is the bully. This is what we see. So esoterically, the show is showing us how trauma seeks domination when it can't find integration. Even look at Angela. She was so horrible. I'm glad she broke her nose. She deserved it. She was a horrible fucking person. She was a true mean girl. The girl lost her mother. She's a new person, new student. She clearly don't have no friends. You just want to pick on her for no fucking reason. Angela was the narcissistic projection archetype. She was symbolic of social hierarchy that enforces worth. So she represented the persona building identity through superiority. The fragment that punishes vulnerability. The archetype of false power based on dominance. So her cruelty to Elle is an extension of internalized insecurity masked as status, right? So and back to that mob. The mob was possessed consciousness. So Jason don't just hunt Eddie by himself. He get as many people as he can to hunt him with him. That's a key because it's showing you mob mentality. It represents hive consciousness disconnected from higher discernment. So we're talking about a field of collective possession and a psychic infection. So once a group enters mass fear, Individuality is gone. This is why people can say, well, individuals might be smart, but people are stupid. You get what I'm saying? Because that morality dissolves, and it's a lot easier to fall into the masses or fall into the group and do what the group is doing than it is to do what you know to be right. So unhealed humanity given authority is really the problem that we see a lot when we look at this. Bullies often exist because societies will still reward dominance over compassion. And the deeper lesson of it is that those who refuse to confront their own shadow become weapons of it. So being bullied marks the soul at a threshold stage. There's a reason they show us these kids being bullied. When you watch it, there's a reason these kids are being bullied. When you look at any movie and there's a group of kids seeking, adventuring as initiates, that's what it has. They're always getting bullied because it creates shame memory, it creates identity distortion, it creates fragmentation of self-trust, it creates fear of visibility. It makes all the things that they do, it makes it earn, it makes it make sense. This is why Byler with Will and Mike don't make sense, y'all. Nothing about that storyline makes sense. It doesn't fit. And if they did it, they would destroy the show, bro. Like, if you want to ruin the show, that's how you ruin the show. Honestly, because it's not earned. It's not there. There's no indication that this is in game for them at all. But from an esoteric lens, when you're talking about bullying initiates a wound of separation. So you got to be separated in order to be initiated. That's the moment that the soul believes it's unsafe to be seen. That imprint becomes an energetic curse that, unless it's consciously broken, which becomes a part of the storyline. So Jason is beyond him being cruel. He's embodying a system that spiritualizes fear, that weaponizes grief, that justifies violence as protection. So this is colonial psychology. This is inquisitory energy. You know what I'm saying? This is a lynch mob archetype reborn when we're looking at the public, when we're looking at the townspeople. So the show is giving us is whispering a little truth here. You know what I'm saying? Demons ain't always in other dimensions. Sometimes they are in the midst of unhealed people, So, and this can really resonate because people have either been bullied, been the bully, or even been ignored, right? And that's the initiation. That's what triggers those emotions within you when you watch this media, because it's mirroring that back to you, So it's almost that time, I wanted to just have a talk about Stranger Things real quick, man, because I really love this show, and I wanted to put this out before we got part 1 of season 5. So we're gonna get 4 episodes tonight, then we'll get 2 episodes, I believe, for Christmas, and then we'll get the finale New Year's Eve. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I plan to be in the theaters to watch the finale. Me and my daughter, we gonna be up in there because we love Stranger Things a little too much. I won't deny it. We really truly love this show. This is our thing. We got our shirts ready, we got our snacks ready. We ready for Stranger Things. So I appreciate all y'all for hopping on, for checking out the video. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please subscribe to the channel. I beg you to please subscribe, like, and share the video with somebody that loves Stranger Things just as much as me. And I hope you guys enjoy it. And we're going to be back momentarily to talk about it. I'm going to give y'all some time to watch it, though. But in the meantime, peace. Let's get ready, nerds. It's Stranger Things Day.